and a warm welcome back to the Esports Central Podcast. We're here for our 6th episode of our 2nd season, and this one, it's a bit of a different one. We got a new, fresh flavor here. A man named Motheo Moleko as our special guest today. Guy from the music world now, very popular musician with some new songs coming out shortly. But his history, he started out in terms of performing live in the live world of events in gaming. How are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, good. Thank you. That was a great introduction. You gave that a go, man. I like that.
Introduction, my
I'm good.
favorite
I'm
part
good.
of the podcast. Like, out by the time the outro comes, I'm like, yeah, Spotify, yeah, whatever. Just go home now. But the introduction, I'm usually cool. Um, so how are you
Thanks
doing
for having
today?
me, man. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. As you said, we have a song. It's not my song. It's a song by a musician I work with, a guy named Jeremy Loops. So he's got a song coming out tomorrow. So we're just busy working promo on that. That's been the whole week. It's obviously Black Friday as well, 2 weeks from now. And so anyone who works in retail knows it's a crazy time of year. But other than that, dude, I mean, it's nearly the end of the year. I'm happy. I'm COVID free. Touch wood. Family's healthy, safe, so can't complain.
That's amazing. I think all the people when I said musician, they were like, who's KC gonna have that's gonna be popular? Then you just mentioned Jeremy Loops. They're like, oh, he's got a big guest now. I'm teasing. But from the gaming side, how did you actually like? Obviously, not just gaming. Everybody plays games. It's 2020, and you've been doing it for way longer
Sure,
than to today. But from the esports
sure.
side, how did you get into like you used to play? What games did you used to play back in the day? What did you used to compete in? What's your history in the gaming side of the world, sir?
Sure. So I mean, this felt right at the beginning. I got into games young. Like I was
Yes.
like 4, like playing at the arcade at 4, knowing how to play games. 6, the first game I got into competitively, and this is obviously way before. I'm gonna give my age away. I got into Street Fighter 2 Hectic. Like this is back when we used to line up at the arcades to play. So that was intense. And then as we got older, I was really into football. So I played Pro Evo quite competitively and quite seriously as well. But a lot of this is before South Africa's internet was accessible and
Right.
before online gaming was, like a standard thing. And then 2000 and what is this? 5, 6? I don't know, 5 or 6. The 360 came out. The Xbox
Mm.
360 came out, and that's when I began playing online. So I missed the whole PC generation. I was like a kid. I couldn't get my parents to spend that money on PCs. Um, so yeah, the 360 came out, and that's where I got into gaming online, like very seriously. And
Okay.
so I was spending 3, 4 hours a day every day, just like playing. And the game I got really good at, as I said, Pro Evo was a very big one. But their servers were horrible at the
Yeah.
time, was just a terrible online experience. And I got really good at Gears of War, of all games.
Ooh.
And so that's where I was dedicating all my time. And that's where I guess esports, quote unquote, I got into.
Mm.
They had I mean, we're talking years ago now, like 2006 or 7. I don't even have my years organized. There was a tournament that was run by an organization that may be defunct now called AGASA, which I think is like the Allied Gaming Association of South Africa. This is literally the wild days when people were just trying to
Mm.
figure things out. And so they had a big Gears of War tournament, and we used to all play online with each other, and then the final happened in person, and yeah, our team won that. It was cool, and we were good, man. I mean, it's very difficult to benchmark just how good you were because I don't know if you remember the 360 days, the games were self-hosted, so you weren't playing on a server.
Right.
One of the players in the lobbies was actually hosting the game. So
Okay.
it was peer-to-peer hosting, which is, I guess, a good thing in that you don't have the crazy situations with ping that you have now with games on huge servers, and the games are local in a sense. Um, but it also meant that when we did go into international lobbies, like just the lag was so bad, you couldn't really benchmark against other players, especially because there were no servers. So without a server, it just wasn't the kind of thing you could do where you could play. But that was the game. Gears of War was the game
Okay.
that I lost myself in at a competitive level. And there've been others I've dabbled in. I mean, there's another random game I was extremely good at. I don't know if you remember a PS3 game called Superstar Dust HD. It was like an indie game. It's like very specific. I think at the time it was like one of those twin stick shooters,
Right.
and I had at one point I had the second or the third highest score in the world. And I guess
What?
it was like a game with one or two. Yeah, it was a game with one or two modes. So literally that one I can genuinely say I was one of the best players in the world at for for a while. But that's kind of my background. And I yeah.
So there's a lot to respond to there. There's like so many questions I want to ask. But since you have such an expansive history
Sure,
of gaming, starting at a young age,
sure,
I want to ask a random
sure.
question here. From like, just think of the generations that passed, like the early games when you're playing arcade, to like, let's say the PS1/PS2 days, to Xbox 360 when you got into the competitive side. Like, give me 4 titles from all the different generations there that are like your favorite games over the times, right? I don't know if we have to
4
really think
titles
here,
per.
but no, 4 titles
No,
per
it was 4
generation.
titles
Like,
per generation.
no,
Per
4 titles.
generation. Oh, that's easy.
Four
That's
titles through like 1 title per
in
generation.
total.
Yeah.
Oh my lord! Wow, that's heavy.
Oh, so that's
Jeez.
harder than the 4
Okay,
titles per
so
generation.
yeah, way harder.
Okay.
So I didn't get the so during the PS1 era, I actually got an N64,
Okay.
and the title of the generation there was undoubtedly The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. That thing is a classic, man. I love that game. Then PS2 era, I got a PS2. Um, Probably Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater.
Nice.
Probably. I mean, yeah, probably. And the PS3 era, I got a PS3 and an Xbox 360,
Right.
and that was a good generation, man. There were a lot of good games in that. It was, a lot of people forget just how good that generation was. That one's neck and neck. I would probably say, wow, that's tough, because you've got
You can give
Halo
2 or
3
3
was obviously
titles from
great.
there because there's so many. Like, even, yeah, it's hard to decide.
I'm gonna commit. I'm gonna choose one. Halo 3 was great. Gears was great. Ninja Gaiden was amazing. Ninja Gaiden 2, I think it was. Um, I'd have to say Gears of War, the original Gears of War. That was obviously the game that got me into competitive gaming, and I was really into it. This generation just passed now was also a blinder of a generation. I think like it was a good generation. I got a PS4 and an Xbox One S, and this is a tough one because it's obviously so fresh in my mind.
Right.
Um, I'm gonna give you a few for this one just because I'm gonna cheat it. I think unlike a lot of people, I think The Last of Us. Oh my gosh, The Last of Us, the original Last of Us, was probably the game of the generation for the previous
Okay.
generation, the PS3 generation, probably. And then this generation, it's tight. I mean, I mentioned before the call that I've been playing Sekiro, which I think is ridiculous. It's
Right.
just an insane game. And then God of War 2018, just also nuts, just crazy game. Um, yeah, yeah, it's between those two. I mean, there's a few others that were great, but it's between those two. So yeah,
All right.
those are the ones I'd say. So Street Fighter 2 back in like the NES days. Then with N64 days, Zelda, PS2 days. I think I said Metal Gear Solid 3, PS3 days, The Last of Us, this generation, Sekiro or God of War, I would say. But I know I'm missing out on a lot of classics.
I mean, that was a pretty cultured list, I have to say. You probably played actually a hell of a lot more games than me. I'm just a degenerate who plays Dota 2 mostly nowadays, but that is quite a list. Respect, brother, respect. So now I want to go back
Thank
again
you.
to one of your original points you mentioned. Like back in those days, like you were saying, when you were playing Gears of War, you're really into it, the game you were the most committed to. It was very hard to really gauge your skill level on a global sense or even maybe a national sense
Yes.
to a certain degree because I think
No, that's not true. National sense. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, because I think I don't know.
No, I
Was
interrupted
there
you.
ranking? Was there ranked gameplay in Gears of War back then? Did you have a ranking?
I believe. Yes, I believe there was ranked
Okay.
gameplay, but back then, what happened was there was an Xbox 3. There was a forum which I think literally was like
Right.
Xbox-360.co.za, and all the elite Xbox players were on that because the community was so small back then.
I
Like
see.
if Microsoft sold more than 10,000 Xboxes in this country, 360s, I'd be surprised. It was a very small community, so In South Africa, we can definitely gauge it. I was
Okay.
definitely one of the best in the country. There's
Okay.
no
Okay.
question about it. But as you say, globally, it was impossible. And so what we used to do, we didn't play ranked games. We used to play casual games because we used to organize the games ourselves.
I
So we were
see.
benchmarking against each other as opposed to benchmarking in a ranked room, where
Mm.
you don't get to choose the people you're playing against.
Yeah, I mean, from that portion of gaming, forums was like kind of what ran gaming, right? There wasn't like, oh, Discord servers and, oh, go to people's Twitter accounts.
No,
Nah, that was how thing, because I mean, Dota, I mean, I come from a Dota background as well. I
yeah.
never played that much Dota 1, but like, that's how everything was through the Dota forums. I can't even remember what that shitty server was called, the Twilight server or something like that. So, okay, like you say,
So,
like, you're always playing at the highest level of competition because all the best players were there. They're like guys ready to play. So, again, you already said you won the national tournaments, but I think like, the fact you couldn't play overseas, how was even like internet back then? Like 2005, fiber wasn't even competent that existed in like South African heads. So in terms of having to play
no,
online, I mean, I don't think many players played online at that point, to be perfectly honest.
no, you're right. Yeah, I think the scene was small. I think what the best internet you could get in this country at the time was a 4 meg line from Telkom.
Right.
It was a DSL line, and 4 meg was the best you could get. Most people had a 1 meg line. I think the 4 meg line was like 800 rand a month, for
Yo.
context back then already. And that's excluding renting the phone line. It was crazy. Most people had like a 1 meg line. So it was like 512 kilobits, a 1 meg line, and a 4 meg line. And so there weren't that many people paying online, but there were people, you just had to match make. And so it was fine. We made do. I think it's very different now.
Mm.
That's what 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So kids who are 20 now were like 5 then. Like, what do they know? Like, it gives a context on time. It gives my age as well. But it is very different now, for sure.
No, I get that for sure. But like you say, even then, I mean, I might have been 7 years old in 2005, or maybe 11 when by the time 2008 came around. But my math's 1 year off there. But like you're saying, there was tournaments already happening. I mean, the person who actually put me in contact with you was Mr. Scant. And we'll get to how this interview came about. But he was also one of the guys way back in the day, like doing things right from the get-go, grassroots effort, and he did so many things going through the years. But even though you were kind of maybe at the same level as him when he started, you kind of diverged later. But at that point, when you guys were playing the tournaments, what was the tournament scene like? I mean, you spoke about the tournament you won, but how did that all those kind of things come together for you all to get there to play and win these? Was it a national championship you won? You said.
Yeah, so dude, this stuff was all like self-organized. This is
Right.
literally the wild, wild west. I think the organization was called Agasa,
Okay.
and it was started by a guy, I believe, called, I think his handle was Eminem, so Minem, who was like a big figure in the South African sort of Xbox 360 scene and just in the Xbox community as a whole. I'm sure he still is. I'm just not involved anymore, so I can't tell you who's still around. And so he organized that. And so on the forum, we would basically like run, the games. The games were just held locally. We'd organize games with each other, but then he put this tournament together where you played all the qualifying rounds online. So the yeah, the seeding rounds, if you will, were all online. And I believe the top 4 teams, yeah, I believe the top 4 teams were invited to the finals, which were in somewhere in Joburg. I want to say Craig Hall. I'm from Joburg, but I live in Cape Town now. So I flew up for that. And
Was that at
so that
Rage
was
by any
obviously a
chance?
trippy experience. It wasn't Rage. No,
Okay.
I think Rage had already started at that time, but it didn't happen at Rage. It happened
Okay.
somewhere else. And so, yeah, I flew up for that. And that was trippy because it was the first time I'd ever played on a 360 on a LAN connection,
Mm.
right? Which was obviously so much quicker. Everything is
Yeah.
so much more responsive because it's like a local network. So that was awesome. And yeah, so our team won that tournament, and it was cool. I mean, it was fun at the time. It was a cool experience, but yeah.
Okay.
But as I
Okay.
say, it was all self-organized. I mean, there was no money involved. I think there was like talk of they had organized something with the South African. like athletics commission where people could get like their Springbok colors, I believe. I
Right.
stand corrected. I mean, there's a lot. It was so long ago, and we were just trying to figure things out. And yeah, I have so much respect for the people who used to put these things together because, as you say, it was genuinely grassroots, right? It wasn't like now, where you're just you're shooting for fish in a barrel. Now, if you say, hey, big high stakes FIFA tournament, there's tens of thousands of players in this country
Right.
who play FIFA often, and there's maybe a few thousand who are like very good. Um, Similarly, Fortnite, similarly, Dota, similarly, League of Legends. I think there's a community around all these games now. And so it's a little bit easier, even domestically, than it was back then. But we didn't know that. Back then,
Right.
we were still hustling, trying to open the NAT on our routers, right? Just trying to get the internet to work, It was a different set
Uh,
of problems.
No, for sure. And like, it's so crazy. You mentioned the difference in perspective. Like, you guys all flew down from Cape Town, or yourself, you did that to make sure you can go play this 4-man tournament that you guys played. You all self-organized qualifiers online and things. Because like now, like I can give an
Yeah.
example. In 2018, there was this company called Lead Pro that ran a tournament in Nelspruit, like at a fancy casino. They was like 10,000 rand worth of prize pool and stuff, and not many, like one or two teams from Joburg and Cape Town came to come play. Like all these big energy, these teams, the energies and the bravados and all of that. Nobody sent their teams to come play, and I was like, why not, guys? And they're like, oh no, we can't make back our money on this. Only a 10,000 rand prize pool. We have to drive there and get accommodation and this and that. And I was like, but like, a history of esports here is people were doing it for the passion. You guys all talk about passion, passion, passion all the time, and now when it comes to it, oh, you wanna now y'all are professionals and you're only playing when it's for bank and all that, and I was just laughing. Like the difference in perspective from then to now, like how gaming has changed.
For sure, dude. I think the scene is different. Listen, I don't decry it.
Right.
I'm one of those people, and maybe it's because I identify as a gamer. I'm one of those people who takes esports seriously
Mm,
as a sporting thing.
right.
Like I think, yeah, teams should genuinely play for prize money. They should play for prestige, and they should pick and choose what they do and what they don't do. But as you say, we didn't have that back then, and I was the only one who flew. Like our team was one of the 4 teams that made it to the final. Everyone else lived in kind of Johannesburg and Pretoria.
Right.
I was in Cape Town. I was at UCT at the time studying, and so I flew for it and at my own expense. Like
Right.
there was
Right.
no
Right. It was
sponsored money.
for
The
sure.
team didn't even put money out. That was all me. I paid for all of that, and I was like in college, and I didn't have money to pay for it. But like I loved it. I had to be there.
Right. That passion is so respectable, and obviously, in a way, it
Yeah,
really worked out. Or maybe when you get to the all of it, it probably worked out all the way through. But it worked out. You came here, you won the
sure.
event, so props to you. But I think how
Thanks,
again
man.
we got to this interview is that I was tagged into your Facebook post by again Scanter, one of the long time people involved in esports here in South Africa, and it was
Mm.
basically, I don't know, that your write up there was like really tragic because you're talking about this event, and then what, like, even you, maybe I should even do that you explained it, what unfolded after you got to that event. You guys won the tournament and all that kind of stuff. What was the team's response
Sure.
and community response actually at that point?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, what happened was because of the way I sound and because of the way I speak, and we all play behind avatars and screen names, so you don't know how people look. Like this is before Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We weren't trying to, put ourselves out there like that. That wasn't the intention. So yeah, I think the in-person tournament was the first time anyone saw me in person. And at that time, every single player there was a white dude. Um, that just is what it was. And I thought nothing of it. We played, our team won, it was cool. But then, word got back to me through someone else in the community who had also made it through to the finals and who I was close with, that, this was the chatter behind the scenes. And he was obviously quite upset about it, and he had said things to them about it. But, that's what he told me. And that was hectic. It was just like, hang on a minute. And so there was one comment in particular that stuck out to me. One of the dudes said to a group of people, how can he play games? He's black. which literally like, and it's like the most bizarre question. It's not it's not even a how can he physically play games? He's black. I like it's an insulting on so many levels. Like what? Like is there a certain intellectual capacity you get
Right.
from being white, or that you're robbed of from being black, from playing games? Like do black people not have access to games? I don't know. Anyway, so that's when I first got wind of it, and then when I got back online to play, yeah, it all just started there. The accents were all weird and the behavior was all strange. And, it was quite obvious that something had changed from that time of being there in person and then meeting me in person and to getting back online again. And so I just kind of stopped playing online. It was literally a one-to-one situation. I was in college. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do career-wise. I was trying to allocate my time in better places or in the right ways, and what's important to me. And I just felt like I just didn't have the emotional capacity to deal with like racists in video
Right.
games. Like what a crazy yeah. It was literally that. It was like I like playing games, man, but like I will, I will, I will go to war with racists and fascists, but in video games, like there, really, you know, and I mean, anyone who's playing games back then, anyone who remembers the kind of the modern warfare servers with 12-year-old kids telling you, I mean, modern warfare lobbies with 12-year-old kids telling you what they did to your mother, like that, that's a different thing. That's just like a general human toxicness. Like that's just what they're
Right.
doing. But this was different. Like these people knew me, and I'd spent
Mm.
hours upon hours playing games with these people. I'm like 3 hours a day, 300 days a year. Like that stuff stacks up.
Right.
And so, and that was hectic. And I literally just pulled the cord. I was just like, I'm out. And that was that. That was the last time I played games online competitively. Um, yeah.
I mean, that story is tragic and sad on so many levels because, again, it's one thing you have a random internet and a stranger tuning you the maddest shit, whether it's racist remarks about how they want to murder your family, all the crazy shit that people do
Sure.
in online gaming and stuff. But when it's your own teammates, people you probably, if you're spending every day playing hours upon hours of games, and these are your friends, the level of betrayal is a whole other
Right.
thing. And I think the story is really
Sure.
sad for me because the whole esports industry and stuff will talk, oh, we've come so far, and give all these stories and give the story about this black FIFA player who's come through and won 400,000 Rand and stuff. But if you really think about it, and myself and Anthony had this chat, similar chat. We had an hour podcast like about a month or two ago, and we spoke about something similar. If you think
Mm.
about the history of how he was telling, he did a whole speech about it on the podcast about how the Twilight servers were back in those days when you were also playing, but from the Dota side, the PC gaming side, how rampant racism was there. How the servers, the admins of the servers allowed all of that to happen, and all those kind of stuff. And then people hear it's like, oh no, it only happened in old days, doesn't really happen now. But I was chatting to a sponsor, about like Dota 2, like what if there's a Dota 2, if we do a Dota 2 event now and all that kind of stuff happening, and it was like, so how many black players are going to come play a South African Dota 2 tournament? I was like, okay, it's 2020, obviously we have socioeconomic problems and stuff in South Africa, but like genuinely, how many black players can I get? And I was thinking, and I was thinking, and I was thinking, and I literally could not for the life of me name more than 2 black Dota players. And that's just the thing, right? Oh, so sure, we have diversity and stuff in the games where black people can naturally gravitate to and play because the barrier of entries aren't too high. Your Tekkens, your FIFAs. I mean, people of color dominate those fucking spaces because that's what we can play. But in terms of the games that were gate kept and are being gate kept, your Dotas, your Counter Strikes, etc. There's still Motheos are still not allowed to go play in those games because nobody has ever taken the time to make space for anybody else, and people are so happy with the current status quo that they will defend it with their lives. Like it's that's why it's tragic, right? Because it's a sad story that's happening to Motheo Moleko, but how many more of you are out there? Like it's 20. You played in 2005. It's 20, and how much has changed? Like genuinely.
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? And that's kind of the thing that people don't understand about racism in a broader sense is that racism and prejudice in general robs people of um, opportunities and experiences and like a sense of being, just literally getting to live your life um, in very obvious ways in the short term. Like you can literally see, like it, as you say, in my case, I walked away. I didn't have to walk away. I chose to walk away.
Right.
It robbed me of that. But the thing is, I had the access, right? So I am that person who could have become an elite Dota player. I could have. I had the access. I had the means to become that person. I had the means to get into PC gaming. Even though I didn't, I had the means. And now, so when you when you allow a system that excludes people, it self perpetuates to the point where people on the outside go, "This isn't for me," right? And so you can never remedy it because the problem is so intrinsic. It's there.
Right.
It's just not for you. And so if you look at like broader parts of maybe this country, if you take it to sport even, rugby even, right? Like maybe that's a good one because it's a very contentious one.
Yes.
People get very upset about the quota systems and that sort of thing. But there are elite South African rugby players who will tell you that they wouldn't have made the teams, they wouldn't have gotten a look in if it wasn't for the quota system because it excludes people at every level. So there's a situation where someone like Brayson Paulser never makes it. He never becomes who he was, because of it. And so, and as a person, individually, it robs you of so much. Like I think the problem with racism is people see it in as like a dichotomy, right? Like people think when we talk about racism, you're talking about like extreme apartheid
Right.
or like extreme Nazism and
Right.
that kind of thing. But dude, like racism is subtle; it exists everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's why you don't have more people of color as business leaders. It's why you don't have more people of color as entrepreneurs because it's a generational thing, and it just
Right.
keeps going down the chain. And so I don't know what it's like now, but I do know with these communities like the Twilight server or, new Discord communities, even specific subreddits, where these people congregate. The people who have a say, the gatekeepers do exclude on that basis. And it's tragic. Like listen, like racism in video gaming is a terrible thing because racism shouldn't be a thing. But in the context of the world's racism, it's not that bad a thing, you'll say.
Right.
But the problem is those attitudes get reinforced and people take it away from their community into the rest of their lives.
There we
And so
go.
what happens if you're like an influential person in business? What happens if you are um, a person who works at admissions in academics? What happens if you're a border control agent who is just having a bad day and you're trying to mess someone else's day up just because you don't like how they look? And so, yeah, it's weird. It's weird talking about it because I haven't thought about it in a long time, And the post I wrote was prompted by something else I'd seen about someone else who was an elite athlete who was robbed of his opportunity to prove how great he was on the world stage because of South Africa's racism. Um, but as you say, dude, it exists and it will continue to exist. I don't know how bad it is today. I just don't know. I just don't know how it is today.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Because like you said a lot there, and there's a lot to unpack. But within the context of esports, I mean, this is like what you were saying is that, I mean, in the grand scheme of
Yeah,
things, how big of a deal is racism in gaming? If you look at the holistic sense of the world, there's wars going on, racism in
sure,
society, people are getting shot in the streets, etc. I mean, it's just
sure,
racism in gaming, maybe. But then at the same time, if you look at the people who are affected by the racism in gaming, we are the same people who have to deal with all that fucked up shit in the real world, and what everybody's
sure,
the most common escape mechanism in the world nowadays, where people go to just detach, just have a take 1 or 2 hours, play games, etc., is filled with fucking racists. And so
sure.
that's what Anthony was saying in on a podcast I had with him also. It's like, how is it fair that only some people are allowed to have that break? Like, we can't even get time off
Sure.
because we must go and play Dota 2 and get called the K word every 5 seconds. You must go and like, it's
Does that happen?
yeah. In today's, you can go. I would
Wow.
like when I released a video on
Wow.
racism. I think at the peak of Black Lives Matter going on, the state of the world being level 5 lockdown. At some point, I was like, I'm so sick and tired of this shit. I was like, just thinking about all the experiences going on, and I was like, I only have one modicum of influence, and that's in the gaming world. And then I was starting to think about the gaming world and
Sure.
the things I've experienced and shit. And I just popped. I went on a video for 40 minutes, and I really went in on all the fucked up shit that happened. And when I released that video, I didn't know how it was gonna go because I thought like majority of the gaming industry is white. I even went and I was like, I brought up white farmers and shit. Like, I went in, and then the response to that video was insane. Like, I got a lot of support from it, and the most important thing that really struck me is that the amount of people of color within the scene and outside of the gaming scene that I know in real life coming and approach me and saying, listen here, thank you for talking on behalf of us, speaking up for us, because we experienced the same shit. One of my childhood friends, I was friends with him when we were like young teenagers, like 14, 15. We had a 2-hour conversation. He's like, yeah, I remember the days when we used to play Dota all the time. Every second game, somebody was calling me a coolie, or there's this racist thing going on, or that thing. And I was like, I don't play. If I go play a game of Dota right now, I will go play on the European servers instead of a SA server, because I don't want to deal with these people, right? They're also bad at Dota, but
Right.
that's 50% about it. But I also don't want to deal with all this racism shit, because it's fucking terrible. And then, like, that's
Yeah.
from the community aspect, right? So I believe my position in the esports world is that I'm 50% community and 50% behind the scenes, because I work events, I do content, etc. So I'm part industry, part community. Now, the community is one part of the issue, but the other part of it is the fucking industry. Because when these racist things happen, there was a case where two professional players from two of the biggest Dota players were caught saying the K word in ranked games multiple times. Right? You look at how
Wow.
one of the biggest orgs dealt with covering that up. Like, they when it came out, they were like, no, that should never happen. We've dealt with this eternally. All this nonsense. They want to cover their bases immediately. They're not worried about the actual issue. Like, no, we dealt with this. We had a meeting with the guy. That's racism solved. It's like, no. If you look at how, one of the team owners, and Barry, even though I flamed him and stuff in the past about other things, I was always giving maximum credit, is he banned these players immediately. And then when VS Gaming, a Telcom-backed organization that has government funding in it, wanted to pay these same people to play, and Barry had to go and tell them, listen here, you morons, we can't, as tournament organizers, we have to stand in unity when shit like this goes down. So they had to be told that they need to ban players who are permanently on their record saying the K word. There's journalistic articles about these players now. It's in the fucking history for days. And then you look at other industry leaders, the biggest influencer in the fucking scene at the time, only comment on racism was that she said 2 months before this that it's a bad look for brands when they go into the South African Dota 2 group that people fight about racism. She sees this racist thing comes up. She goes and responds to one of the people who told her that's not a thing. No brands care about it. Like, just some player and who works with me on podcasts and stuff. He just responds to this guy, like, quote, retweets his post from 2 months ago, like, ha, I told you so. That's the fucking industry contribution to dealing with these things. And I was like, when you think about, and this is why I like talking to you and speaking to Anthony about it, then when you go to the whole history about how many people have been excluded, the mentality is there, is that if you see they have all this fucking history of fucked up shit as the industry leaders of the scene, and your response is, ha, I told you so, and VS Gaming not even wanting to look at the fucking thing, bothering, it's disgusting. Like, how are we going to get better as a scene when right from the top we have morons managing us, people who are ultimately complicit in racism? Like, so you ask me how it is today, I think it's fucking horrible still today.
Listen, I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. I appreciate your candor. This is the thing, dude. This is the thing, and this is why. Anyway, so this is the thing, is that, like, that's how it, when racism is normal for people, because these two players who said those things, that's normal for them. That's how they talk to their families.
Right.
That's how they talk to their friends. That's how they move through the world. Just because they've had a talking to, which literally goes, don't say that in a public forum, doesn't mean they don't think it. The reality is, you're not going to get industry support when the people who benefit from it are the leaders, right?
Right.
You're just not going to get it. You're just not going to get it. And you're also not going to get industry support if it doesn't get out there. And so esports in South Africa, and this is conjecture, as you know, I've been honest, I'm not in the scene anymore. Esports in South Africa is relatively small, right? Like
Facts.
we don't have, do we even have a single team that has, 500,000 followers or on any of the social platforms? Probably not, right? So there is no 100 Thieves of South Africa. You don't have that kind of stuff here, You don't have those crazy Dota tournaments. You don't have those crazy Fortnite tens of thousands of people. I mean, we've got Rage, but Rage isn't E3. Rage isn't Eurogamers conference in the UK. And so because it's so small, people can get away with these things, right? For the most part, because even if you take it to the media and the news, people are going to look at it and be like, video gamers have some racism problems. Okay. And that's exactly. So it only affects those people inside. So the work you're doing is important.
Right.
And that's the work I opted out of, And I think it's an important thing to say to people is that, like, as people of color in this country with these experiences, you have to pick your battles. You have to, because you don't have the physical, emotional, or mental capacity to fight every single battle. You just don't. But the battles you do pick, you have to go in and commit to them, because the work you're doing is important. Right. And so that's why I respect what you're doing. I respect that you're standing there going, all right, you know what? I have enough of a platform. It doesn't have to be a huge platform. It just has to be enough of a platform to say something and to do something. And you're doing that. And that's cool, man. I'm glad to hear that that's the route you've gone, versus the route I went, which was to go, this is just not worth it for me, And I think you have to push on with that, because kids need to be allowed to play games, dude. And kids need to have the opportunity to become great if they want to be, or they also need the opportunity to just like decompress if that's what they want. And just like the online community is so toxic, especially because of screen names, right? Like, I think it's better now just because I don't think it's better. I think the level of incidence is maybe lower now because there are real world consequences, especially outside South Africa.
Right.
But that internet anonymity that lets you be a dick to people just makes it even worse in a video game where you may be getting your ass handed to you. Can you imagine being like a racist Dota player and having some Indian chap from fucking Chatsworth kicking your ass and just being casual about it? Like that, that would drive you nuts, right? That's like a racist's worst nightmare. Right. Because racism believes and says that these other people are inferior to me in every regard. Right. They have less intelligence, but now you're beating them at a video game, which is a complex thing, right? And maybe they're just like genetically, predisposed, but that's because they're closer to savages. But now you're doing that shit that like they're supposed to be great at and they're losing at it. And that stuff is dark for them. And so you get to live rent-free in their heads. Right. But the problem is they still have ammo to make your life shit. And so you're always balancing what you're doing. You're pushing the boundaries, you're breaking down barriers, you're opening doors for people. But at the same time, you have to protect yourself. And that's the balance you have to find, dude. That's the balance you have to find.
I mean, what you say resonates so much, like literally to me personally, because I think I said this in past content, is that I was at the top of the scene in terms of I worked as I came into the scene as a caster for Dota, and in 2 months I was considered the best caster already. My resume spoke it.
Wait, hang on. Slow down. What is a caster in Dota? What does a caster do?
So Dota is the PC game, and your caster, you call them
I know the game.
casters.
I know the game.
Right. They do the commentary for the game.
Okay, cool. I know what that is. Yeah, okay, never mind. That's fine. I know the term shoutcaster. I didn't know that the shorthand for it was caster. Yeah.
I abbreviated.
No, that's cool.
So
That's guys. I'm learning the lingo.
within 2 months, I was the top caster in Dota 2 because there was everybody else who was involved in the scene at the time were too busy. They old guys. They were happy and complicit in their place in the community, and they never really did any online
Sure.
stuff. They had, I don't know, whatever beef going on. So there was all these games going on. Nobody wanted to cast, and I was there, and I fucking loved Dota. And at the time, I loved the scene, and I was there casting every single game that came my way, and people could see the passion. So very quickly, the community took a liking to me, right? Took industry a bit longer to see me because obviously I wasn't white. But by the time I got into industry, I worked every single Dota event that fucking year because if there wasn't a Dota, like, your talent lineup wasn't complete that year if I wasn't there. So I was at the top of the scene. I know I was. So when I started doing this work, and beyond just the racism work, I spoke about many other things, about how tournament organizers need to do the right thing, this, that, whatever. But in the grand scheme of things, none of those things really matter. If people fuck up their own business decision, that doesn't affect it. But when I started doing this work, like, it cost me. I know for a fact how many bridges I've burnt because I'm calling out people for acting in the forms of white supremacy and shit. But I'm not saying this for people to feel sorry for me, by the way, because there's a second part to this. Like you say, there was a point where, in terms about looking after yourself and thinking about the future, I made a tweet at Mental State. I was like, why are you using an all-white panel in 2020? Like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And I was like, the way these people responded who saw this message, all the other talent working there, my friends, they were like, oh, look at this guy. He wants to work the CSGO event. He's just salty he didn't get work. I was like, hold up, motherfuckers. I never said I want to work CSGO in my life. I don't even like that game. But beyond that, the only thing I regret there, and lesson I learned that I will never make a mistake again, is I realized, started laughing. I was like, if these people don't realize that they shouldn't be hiring an all-white panel in 2020, then there's no hope for them. Why must I go and tell them free business advice how they should run their business when I can literally just go do it myself? Like you say, there's no 100 thieves in South African esports. We're all small and just trying. So a day's gonna come where, like you say, you can't really have, and this is like, I get bogged down to still have the conversation to explain to people why you can't say the fucking K word. That's the level of gaming thing. But I need to be having bigger conversations about how equity and things needs to change and that kind of stuff. And that's going to scare, obviously, the people involved. But it's going to happen. I'm telling them now, in 5 years' time, the circle that they have, where it's the only white people involved in doing this thing, it will not exist. I'd say that for a fact.
No, but you're right though. That's just how things work, man. Like, in South Africa, the most uncontroversial thing you can say about racism, and the most uncontested thing you can say about racism in a South African context is 85% of our population is black. 85, like literally, you're talking about 17 in every 20 people in this country is black.
Mm-hmm.
Now, help me understand how, with those numbers and those demographics, anyone thinks it's possible to have any major industry in this country that's predominantly white at the base level and at leadership level and at judging level. It's crazy, right? Like, and if it is that way at present because of historical reasons, that's why you have to have redistribution and redress. And so sometimes things take a while. They often take a while. But that does not mean you're not making progress, And so that's the commitment you have to have, is that, like, all right, this is what we're doing. I'm committed to this process, and this is the commitment you've made. And I think it's a good commitment. It's a good commitment. But that's cool. You're a caster. That's awesome, dude. Like, I'm thinking of, so I'm gonna be honest, right? I think a lot of your community who see this video are gonna be like, this guy is so square. I've watched Dota games, and I still don't, because I've never played it. I still don't fully understand it, but I've obviously watched like the big highlights of the more recent tournaments. There was one, and I think Red Bull's a big sponsor in the scene, and they made that one documentary about that one team, and and the casters are such important people in it, because like Dota is super complex, right? It's you're having to call specific characters and their specific moves, and quickly, and you're watching everything happening at once. It's a lot. It's like overwhelming. I've always found the casters in that scene to be like super cool. It's just like such a nice thing. And it reminds me of have you ever seen that really famous I mean, yeah, if you're into fighting games or if you're just into gaming in general, esports, there's a really famous video from Evo in 2004 or 5. And it was Street Fighter 3. And there's this guy, his name is Dago. I think he's widely considered the best Street Fighter player of all time. Was fighting against. Find that video. You should put that in your
Okay.
show
I'm
notes
putting it there
if
right now
you've
so
never
I don't
seen it.
forget.
Put it in your show notes in case you've never seen it. And basically, I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but he was about to lose the fight, and he's up against Chun-Li, and the guy does like 10 parries, which in that game was crazy difficult because
Right.
not the hitbox, the frame count for the parries was way narrower than it is in today's games.
Right.
And but the back then the shoutcasting wasn't as good as it is now.
Right.
But it makes it, it's like a big part of what makes it
Sure.
electrifying. I think that's cool, dude.
I
I
mean,
think
it's
that's
just
super
about the
cool.
passion at the end
It's a
of the
cool
day,
thing to
right?
go
Like,
to.
this is what I realized because when I started getting more into it, I was like, oh no, I work on this technical aspect and say these words and hype up like this. But I think my second cast ever is still probably my best cast ever because I had the most passion, and you can see it was a guy who was genuinely having the best time, And I think that really comes through, and that's a big part of casting. So Dota, I'm not biased. I actually don't think I'm biased when I say this, but Dota's casters, just in general, not me. Like Dota casting is very difficult. Like I'm a way better FIFA caster than I'm a Dota caster because it's an
super
easier
difficult.
game. But
Super difficult.
the casters are amazing in our game. Like I watched League of Legends, they World Finals,
It's
and I was
crazy,
like, what are these people wouldn't even be tier 2 casters in Dota because it's not good enough. Like Dota, Counter-Strike also has really good casters, but yeah, like I think in esports, it's a weird conversation I had because before this podcast, we were like 4 casters, and we used to have like a panel podcast. It wasn't really a guest thing and stuff, and we always had these discussions with like esports casters and sportscasters are completely different because sportscasters are just there to make sure the game runs as smooth as possible, hype up the best things, very professional and stuff. But esports casters, we are all crazy people ourselves with our own personalities, our own personas. We do content on the side, etc.
Sure.
So it's a whole different ball game.
Sure.
You can't even just go towards the sports playbook and stuff. But I feel like
I do think though.
Oh, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, I do think though you can obviously learn a lot from sportscasters,
For
right?
sure.
Like as you say, esports casters get to have their own personalities. They do content on the side. They're their own people. But there are definitely sportscasters who, just from a delivery perspective, you can learn so much from. Like,
100%.
when I watch esports casters, I'm just amazed at like their ability to capture so much detail in an easy, digestible way quickly. Because obviously, like when Dota games get crazy, they get crazy.
Right.
And if you're not like a Dota player, you don't even know. And I play games, man. I've been playing games my whole life. And I'll watch and I'll be like, I don't even know what's going on here. I can't tell you who's winning right now, who's losing. He's just made reference to this move. And I don't I can't even break it down at that level. So that is an interesting thing. But like sportscasters, especially if ever you're bored, there's a guy, his name is Mike Breen. And he's an NBA cop. Oh my, like, dude, so he's like the template for me. Like whenever I talk to people about calling sport, or in this case esport as well, he's a great example of someone whose style is very singular. His voice is very unique. He's got very good catchphrases that people wait for. I think that's a big deal. If you don't have a catchphrase, you got to find something. You have to get something that makes people go, oh, he's hyped up now. It's real now. Whatever that is, you can figure that out for yourself. I think that's like a cool thing to figure out. And also, as you say, esports casters are like quite animated. And so you probably also benefit from something as random as like wrestling casters, right? Like they had crazy things as well, just like lots of personality, their own unique things going on. It's such an interesting part of the game, calling the game as opposed to being in the game. It's cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
Did you mention Mike Breen? I'm just thinking, bang, bang, with a Steph Curry when oh man,
bang, exactly. Puts it in.
Dude, he's too good.
Yeah,
like
I love it, man.
There's so many things you can learn from so many different aspects. Like one of the Dota casters, Capitalist, I think he's probably top 3 Dota casters of all time at this point, but definitely top 2 at the moment. And he was saying that that like when he was learning esports casting, he never really looked at the Dota casters. He looked at the StarCraft casters. He looked at he looked at all these different aspects and worked in little things there that fit with him and his personality. So from the music industry, you probably know the best about all these kind of stuff, because that's what, obviously, you left esports and all of that. And maybe, maybe in a way, it's a funny thing to say, but maybe it was a blessing you experienced that racism, that you could leave the stupid fucking scene and move on to greener and fresher pastures, Mr. Jeremy Noop's collaborator.
Listen, I think music for me was always like what I was gonna do, and I just loved playing games. That was what it was. So the games pushed me to just focus more on the music. I just had more time, after it. So the music was, I think for me, was always going to happen. It was just a case of figuring out how it was going to happen. And like you, like I'm a performer as well. I work industry side as well, in sort of product management, digital marketing side as well, at label level. So yeah, I do a few things in that space. And yeah, I wouldn't call it a blessing in disguise, but a part of me definitely went, you know what, you're not spending 4 hours playing. No, don't apologize. I think a part of you is right in that, I can't justify spending 4 hours a day playing games. I just can't do it anymore. I just can't. But if I was in the game and I was like competing at an elite level, you have to. That's the thing you have to remember, is you have to,
For sure.
And I think your audience is going to be maybe a bit more a hardcore audience, and if you're not playing that much every day, there's just no way you're ever going to become good enough to compete with anyone, whatever your game is,
Right.
whether it is the traditional esports juggernauts like StarCraft and Dota and CSGO and League of Legends, or if it's like the new breed of games that have huge communities, like your Fortnites, like your Valorants, like your Apex Legends, even Call of Duty, right? Like, you have to be putting in the hours. I think that goes for anything. You have to like put the hours in. And I was never going to be able to put the hours into music and gaming. And so, yeah, in a way, it was a wake-up call that like, holy shit, you're spending a lot of time playing games. Everyone would always say to me, but I could always justify it. I'd be like, yeah, but I love it. And look at me, I'm so damn good at it. And then it was just all gone. And that was weird for like a little bit, but then it was fine again. It was just like, sweet, I'm just write these songs. And it's been good. I get to travel the world doing what I do when we can travel. And we're not locked down by this pandemic. And yeah, I've just seen lots of things. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Like you say, I mean, what I find industry interesting, like that you move to the, obviously, like you say, you're always musically inclined, so it's kind of naturally where you gravitate. But like at the start of this pandemic, or during the heavy portions of lockdown, one of my good friends, Glenn, you might even know him, Glenn Kisala. His gaming nickname is GK. He's done a lot of work in the event industry, so worked a lot in the music industry and stuff. He knows people. Tex, one of his who runs Tex in the City, the online magazine. They collaborated to make like a music and gaming event together. So musicians came to play games, and they got like pro gamers to come play game, like a charity event and stuff. And I think there's a lot of parallels between these two worlds, right? The gaming world and the music world, in terms of like, again, doing these live events, etc. So you think there's any lessons you can bring from the music world that you think the esports world, even though I know you're not involved in it anymore, but like you still, anybody listening can see, you follow the big events, you still have your passion for gaming. Like, what can we learn from one way or even the other way? Like, what are the parallels there?
I think, events exist because communities exist, right? And so running an event is the reward of the hard work of building the community. Events themselves take a lot. To make an event compelling, there's a lot that goes into it. And I don't know how sophisticated esports events are, because I don't know what kind of money goes into it now. I don't know what the logistics side of things is. But if you're putting on a good event at a technical level, and you've got good entertainers, and I guess in this case it would be the athletes who are playing, all you have to have is just great community who buy into attending. And so in many ways, the parallel is actually very strong in that South Africa has never had a strong eventing industry. We've never been a country from a music side. We have big music events, but not many of them. And we have artists who can sell out big venues, but again, not many of them.
Right.
And so we're always a step behind what people are able to do abroad, just because the amount of money isn't as insane. You know,
Very
you've
true,
obviously
like you said.
seen totally, dude. I mean, does am I correct in saying, if I'm wrong, please correct me. Am I correct in saying Valve owned Dota?
Yeah,
Is
they
that
do.
right?
They do.
Okay, so yeah, so I obviously saw like a big Dota event from 2-3 years ago, and it was insane. It was like tens of thousands of people going nuts with like these ridiculous screens all around the venues. We don't have that kind of thing here, but you can still do something cool. And I think the benefit gaming has is there's already a community there. All you need to do as the leaders in those communities in your own ways, and maybe even the influencers in those communities, if you want to branch off and do your own thing, is find a way to pool resources and pool the community and get them to come to things, right? I don't know if there's a culture of attending esports events. And if there isn't a culture of that, then that culture has to be created. But it can only be created if you're constantly pushing it where you're engaging with people, you know? So musicians, the hook a musician has is the music, right? If the music is good, people will keep coming back. Eventually, you get them into your socials, you engage them, then you saw them on coming to an event. That's the long game. The
Right.
same thing applies here with esports. Is if you've got a game that has a great community that are engaged and love it, and if you know where they are, the trick then is to find out how to create experiences that allow them to come together. And I do think, you know, Tekla's event, the Tex in the City the gaming collaboration, I saw that online, is the right sort of idea. That kind of thing is maybe the way to start to get outside interest. But I wouldn't focus on outside interest. I just focus on the people who are already there and who already care. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means you guys need to find a way to, I don't know who distributes what anymore, but maybe you guys need to find a way to communicate with the Megarams of the world and the Strakinicals of the world, whoever represents,
Right.
the bigger brands, and get a way to get them to put the money up for events. You know, get a way to get something, because FIFA's huge, dude. Like,
Right.
if there was a great campaign and a great event with the right people and the right resources, you can get thousands of people to a FIFA event,
For
thousands, because
sure.
people care. It's just about how you put it together.
I mean, PS Gaming
And
did it
yeah,
for
that's
2
maybe the
years.
thing to figure
They
out.
ran million rand events, like 1.5 million rand events each year. And they built the whole stadium in Monty. I mean, must have been at least 2,000-3,000 feet through that door. They had professional musicians there. It
Amazing.
was like a masterful festival of gaming. That's what they call it, the VS Gaming FIFA Festival. I mean, the event had its issues and
Amazing.
stuff to a certain extent, but like it was literally a monumental achievement in gaming. Like that kind of stuff,
It's amazing.
setting their own precedent. That's really awesome. So, like you say, there is
That's awesome, dude.
a lot that can happen, a lot that has happened. But I think you're thinking about how tapping into the communities that are already there is like also a very important thing to do, because the last people I interviewed, actually I did the interview yesterday, I'm doing one after another now, was people from a company called UGC, 3 Indian guys or 2 Indian guys and 1 colored guy, I'm not sure, and they run Tekken tournaments. But the reason they started doing Tekken tournaments, they weren't happy with how Tekken tournaments are run here, and they were like, they so passionate about Tekken, they got into to run tournaments that they want to see, and they all brilliant at what they do, and they come from a strong background. Like also one came from like the sneaker breakdown scene and has production experience already, so running the live streams and stuff is great for him. Another one is an animator, so the terms of like the highlights and stuff they can put out is so great, and they're so passionate and hyper connected to the communities that they can always do a good job when they're running events, which is pretty insane. So they're
Awesome.
already hyper tapped in. So in tournament organizers in South Africa, it's kind of weird because all the really big ones, they're trying to do everything because that's how they need to do to survive, because the scene is small. But when doing everything, it kind of gets lost in translation also, because the communities they're interacting with, the Call of Duty one's different from the Dota one to the Dota one to the CS one, the CS one to the PUBG one. It's all completely different. You need to understand the communities you're interacting with, and I think that is something that actually really needs to be approved upon in SA, because we don't have people who truly understand the communities they're interacting with, and I think that makes a difference.
I think so too. But as you say, the problem is
It's small.
the money. That's the
For sure.
problem. Is you have to do so much just to be able to sustain the business, and so you end up splitting your resources. But I think you guys will figure it out if the right people. The reality with events in this country is eventing companies will always die, and new eventing companies will always come to life and fill
Right.
the void, like any healthy industry, even though this one maybe isn't as established as we'd like to see. So there's a space for new dudes to come up with like UGC to do a Tekken tournament, which to me sounds like a wild thing to commit to, right? Because I didn't realize the Tekken scene was still so big. I mean, I was into that scene around Tekken 3, Tekken Tag,
Right.
Tekken 4, even Tekken 2, even. But yeah, I get it, dude. That's the thing to do is there's opportunity. And as long as the motivation isn't money, and this speaks to like events at all levels in this country,
Right.
as long as your primary motivation isn't like money, you can make something work. But if your primary motivation is financial, and you're just an entrepreneurial person, I think there are easier and less stressful ways to earn a living than eventing. I really do.
No, I agree. I give the same when I was like, if you're coming into esports for money, go do something else, because there is no money here, dog. Absolutely nothing. Oh man, it's been an
That's
absolute pleasure
crazy.
talking to you so far. Like we've chatted an hour
Yeah,
now.
you did
Time has
too, man.
flown by. Such a expansive thinker, great mind, great speaker. I see why you're a performer, Mr. Motheo. Is there anything you'd like to touch on? No rush to close up, but any last things you want to go through? Shout out to
No, man.
anybody?
I don't. No, not really. No, not really. I mean, as I say, dude, I'm just really just focused on just music at the moment. I was just, yeah, that's what we're doing. We're just building things. I'm very obsessed with Sekiro. If you haven't played it, listen. Listen. I
Okay,
know
I'm
people
listening.
are crazy obsessive about From Software games. I get it. I get it. I played the original Demon Souls on the PS3, so I'm hyped for it on the PS5, which I'm getting next week, which is really exciting.
I'm
At the
jealous.
time of recording next week. Um, but yes, like if you're into games with really deep combat, and just like butter smooth controls, I cannot recommend that game more. I think it would be a misrepresentation to say it's fun. I don't think fun is the word I would use for that
Oh
experience,
man.
but it's very rewarding. If you've not checked it out, I don't know if you're into those kind of games, but if you've not checked it out,
Dude,
definitely check it out.
I'll
And
tell you
then
a story before you
while I'm
go.
shouting out,
I'll tell you a story
go
before
tell
you
me.
go. Right? So I played. You know the game Shadow of Mordor, the Lord of the Rings game. That
Of
game
course,
came
yeah,
out.
of course.
That game came out. One of the few games I played since I started playing Dota. I bought that game and I fucking adored that game. I loved it. Right? I played it.
It was
I went
wonderful.
through
I love that game too.
30 hours in like less than a week. I finished the game and I was like, I need more. And I looked on Google. I saw the genre was action RPG, and I don't play that many games because I'm just a Dota degenerate. So I was like, okay, let me go and look for what games come out. Then I saw this game Bloodborne is coming out, super hyped up and things. I was like, oh, action RPG
Oh,
genre.
shame.
It sounds cool.
Oh,
I bought this game and
shame.
I was not prepared. Then after I played for a little bit, I was like, what kind of game is this? Then go back on Google and I see the people who made Dark Souls made this game, and I was like, what have I done? I tried. I really tried 2 whole hours, and I couldn't even make it through to the first level. And I was like, okay, let me try this again. I played, and I was like, okay, I got the hang of this. I'm killing all these guys. I'm making it through the missions, easy peasy. Get to the final boss, and I was like, nah. I just switched off the PlayStation. I was like, never fucking again. Put the game in the cupboard, and I just left it. I hate those games.
Dude,
I'm
I
not
get
good
that.
enough with them. I'm not good
I get
enough with
that,
them.
dude. Yeah, dude. You know the whole thing with that community is what like their catchphrase is "get good." Um, yeah, you don't play those games for fun. They
Yep.
just because I don't think they are. Like, I can't genuinely say I've ever played those games and sat there thinking I am having fun. Like it's not the emotion
Right.
I'm feeling. It's definitely rewarding and it gets under your skin. You just want to keep playing, but
Yeah.
fun isn't the term. So check that out. I mean, it's a big game. I mean, people know of it. The other game because it's important to shout out underrated great games.
Yes.
There's a game called Control by Remedy. I think it won like Game of the Year at the Game Awards last year, the year before. It's ridiculous. It's like insane. I think financially it didn't do that well, but it's amazing. So Control by Remedy. It's also like a third person action adventure sort of shooter puzzle game thingamajig. Like well worth checking out. And yeah, that's it, dude. That's it. I will also just say, and this is a very random observation, I have been drawn to PC gaming the last maybe 2 or 3 months, just because it's like a part of my life I've never really invested in. I've always just played consoles just because I feel like they make more sense financially. And my computer's always been a Mac, and it's always been a laptop. So in saying that, I decided recently that I'm definitely not going to become a PC gamer, because you guys spend an incredible amount of money on your rigs. It's quite something.
We get obsessed.
It's quite something, dude. It's quite something, dude. I used to build before I got my first laptop. I mean, back when I was in school, I used to build my own PCs. But I mean, you could put something simple together for like a few grand back then, like 3 or 4 grand. You can't even buy a graphics card these days for like a good one.
Yes.
I saw these like the RTX 3080 and the 3090s. That stuff is like 25 grand in this country. It's like crazy. It's like but I respect it. I feel like it's a part of my life I've just not experienced enough. And if there's anyone in this community who wants to invite me over to try out their high-end gaming PC rigs, I will take you up on that.
All right, I'm gonna force one shout out of you here, and I know before
Sure.
the start of the interview you told me you're releasing a new part in collaboration for a new song, working on a new song that's releasing, I believe, probably a week prior to this interview coming out. At time of recording.
Sure.
Yeah. Time of release. Time of recording.
At the time
tomorrow.
of recording, it's coming out in 3.5 hours at the time of recording. Yeah, it's a new Jeremy Loop single called Till I Found You. I just blanked for a second there. We feel good about it. We think it's a pretty big deal. We think it's gonna do well. I wrote on the song. I don't perform on the song, but I'm one of the writers on the song. Yeah, I think by the time people watch this, if it's doing what we think it's gonna do, they'll know it and have heard it, and ideally be tired of it because it's getting played that much. That's always the hope. Is just like, but yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So yeah, check that out. It's a big song. I think it's a really strong release, and that's really the only shout out. That's the only shout out. And if you're interested in keeping up with me, I'm not the best on social media because I work in social media.
Right.
Like a skinny chef, right? Like never, I just can't make the time, but it's not a good reason. Just check me out. Motheo Moleko on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I might even get a TikTok. Who knows?
Oh.
And yeah, and gaming wise, if people want to play along, I mean, I do have like PSN, and I'm probably gonna get a Series X at some stage. And so it's just Pillsbury Lives on PSN. I'll send you that for your show notes if people want to ever play anything online, but not competitively because that scene is not fun. I'm joking. I'm sure the scene is great. I'm just not good anymore, and so I want to curb expectations.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for joining. It was an absolute pleasure so far. I hope that song does be that #1 hit you guys are hoping for. And yeah, thank you all for listening to this interview. I do think I'm gonna say this in my own interview. I'll say it myself, but I think it's one of my best interviews I've done yet. Had a very interesting guest. So
get it, homie. Get it.
Follow the podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, everywhere we at. On YouTube, the video podcasts are better, even though I fucked up last week's one. And yeah, Esports Central, the publication, is always there. Check us out at esportscentral.co.za. Thank you for listening, and cheers to many more. Bye.
Cheers, man. Thank you.